He had always dreamed of standing in front of a room full of people who could change the world with the decisions they made. Ever since he was a child, he loved to imagine solutions to problems that others ignored, ideas that could make life easier for people, or make a company stronger, more innovative, and more honest. His mind worked in patterns and connections that few others noticed, and he often felt frustrated when adults dismissed his ideas as too ambitious or too simple. But he never stopped thinking, never stopped imagining, and most importantly, he never stopped believing in himself. Now, years later, that young man was dressed in a crisp suit, polished shoes, and a tie that matched his determination. He was about to enter the boardroom of one of the biggest companies in the city. This was the moment he had been waiting for. This was the chance to show them what he could do, to prove that his ideas were not just possible but necessary. His heart raced as he walked through the shiny glass doors of the building, feeling the weight of both excitement and fear. He had prepared for this presentation for months. He had spent late nights refining every detail, practicing his speech and imagining every possible question the executives could ask. The boardroom was intimidating. A long table stretched across the room, filled with executives in sharp suits. The walls were lined with certificates, awards, and framed photographs of the company's proudest moments. The air smelled faintly of coffee and power, a combination that always made him feel both energized and nervous. He noticed the way some of the executives glanced at him, some with polite interest, others with the kind of curiosity that could quickly turn into dismissal. He took a deep breath, reminding himself why he was there. This wasn't just about a job. This was about recognition, about the chance to bring his vision to life. He began his presentation with confidence. His voice was steady. His hands moved naturally as he pointed to graphs and charts he had designed. He explained how the company could improve its product line, save costs, and reach new markets. He shared ideas that were bold but practical, ideas that could give the company a fresh direction in a changing world. He spoke about innovation, about understanding customer needs, and about the responsibility of a company to lead with integrity. He could see some executives nodding slightly, while others leaned back in their chairs, skeptical. But he did not falter. He believed in his ideas, and that belief carried him forward. Then, without warning, a senior executive interrupted. "I think we've heard enough," the man said. His tone was sharp, dismissive, and final. "These ideas are unrealistic. This isn't the kind of strategy we're looking for. You can leave now." The words hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, he could not speak. The room felt colder, smaller, almost hostile. He glanced around at the faces of the executives. Some avoided eye contact, clearly uncomfortable. Others seemed relieved that the presentation was over. He felt his stomach twist with embarrassment and anger. After months of preparation, after countless hours of research and practice, he had been dismissed in less than a minute. He gathered his papers slowly, trying to keep his composure, but his hands shook slightly. As he turned to leave, he heard a few whispers, and he sensed that at least some people recognized the unfairness of the situation. But in that moment, it did not matter. He walked out of the boardroom with his head held high, even though his heart was heavy. Outside, he leaned against the cool glass wall of the building, taking deep breaths. He felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him, anger, disappointment, and sadness, but also a spark of determination. He realized that this rejection, as painful as it was, could not define him. The world had tried to put limits on him, to tell him that his ideas were too big or too different, but he refused to accept that. He promised himself that he would return stronger, smarter, and more prepared. That promise was like a fire in his chest, pushing him forward even when doubt crept in. The following days were difficult. He could not stop thinking about the dismissal. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind, analyzing every word, every gesture. He wondered if he had said something wrong, if he had failed to present his ideas convincingly. But deep down he knew the truth. The problem was not him. The problem was the unwillingness of others to see potential, to embrace new ideas, and to value talent regardless of who it came from. He reminded himself that his worth was not measured by one room of people or one failed presentation. He decided to focus on what he could control. He began researching other companies, looking for opportunities to showcase his ideas. He started attending business events, networking with people who could see beyond appearances, people who were willing to listen. He also began building his own plan, something that was entirely his own, something he could nurture and grow without needing permission from anyone else. He spent long nights drafting proposals, calculating budgets, and imagining the company he could one day create. It was hard work, often lonely, but it was work that gave him purpose. Along the way, he faced many challenges. Some people doubted him, some laughed at his ambition, and some doors closed in his face. He struggled financially, sometimes wondering if he could continue. There were moments when he felt exhausted, frustrated, and unsure if he had the strength to keep going. But every time he thought of that boardroom, of the moment he had been dismissed, he found a renewed sense of determination. He refused to let that day be the end of his story. He also found support in unexpected places. Mentors, friends, and even strangers offered guidance and encouragement. They reminded him that talent and determination could overcome prejudice and rejection, that his ideas mattered, and that his vision was worth pursuing. Their words became a source of strength, helping him push through the moments of doubt and fear. Months turned into years, and he slowly began to see progress. His own small business started to gain attention. Clients appreciated his creativity and his honesty. He built a team of people who shared his vision, people who were willing to work hard and believe in something bigger than themselves. He learned lessons about leadership, patience, and strategy. He discovered that failure was not the opposite of success, but a part of the journey toward it. Each setback taught him something new, and each small victory fueled his confidence. Even as he worked hard to grow his own company, he never forgot the boardroom that had dismissed him. That moment remained a source of both pain and motivation. He remembered the expressions on the faces of the executives, the tone of dismissal, and the sudden emptiness of the room when he was told to leave. But he also remembered the spark of belief within himself, the fire that had not been extinguished despite everything. He realized that one day he would not just return to that company as a visitor, as he had once been. One day he would return as someone they could not ignore, someone whose ideas and vision could no longer be dismissed. He spent every day preparing for that moment, honing his skills, expanding his knowledge, and building his reputation. He understood that success was not just about ideas, but about execution, leadership, and resilience. He became more than just a dreamer. He became a doer, a person who could turn vision into reality. He learned to navigate challenges with patience, to embrace failure as a teacher, and to trust his instincts even when others doubted him. And slowly, the world began to notice him. People who once ignored him now sought his advice. His ideas began to shape projects, influence decisions, and inspire others. He had become someone who did not just dream but delivered, someone who could turn obstacles into opportunities. Despite all the progress, he never lost his humility. He remembered where he had started, the young man standing nervously outside a boardroom full of ideas but dismissed by those in power. He carried that memory with him, not as a burden but as a reminder of what was possible when one refuses to give up. That day, that painful dismissal had not been the end. It had been the beginning of a journey that would ultimately lead him to a place of respect, authority, and achievement. By the time he walked through the doors of his small office, reviewing the plans for the next big step in his business, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He was no longer just a young man with ideas. He was a force to be reckoned with, and he knew that one day when the time was right, he would return to that boardroom. Not to prove them wrong, but to show what perseverance, talent, and determination could accomplish. That day, the young man who had been dismissed would come back stronger, not as an outsider, but as a leader in his own right. And as he looked out the window at the city, thinking about the long road ahead, he smiled. The journey was far from over, but he was ready. Ready to face challenges, ready to take risks, and ready to turn every obstacle into a stepping stone toward his dreams. He had started as someone ignored, dismissed, and underestimated. But he would not remain that way. His story was just beginning, and it promised to be extraordinary. After leaving the company that had dismissed him, he stepped into a world that was far from easy. The excitement of his dreams collided with reality, and he quickly realized that building something from nothing required more than just ideas. Every day brought new challenges, and every step forward seemed to be met with obstacles. Some days he felt unstoppable, filled with energy and hope, while other days were heavy with doubt and frustration. But he had made a promise to himself and he clung to it. He would not give up no matter what. At first, it was difficult to find people who believed in him. He sent countless emails, attended meetings that went nowhere, and pitched his ideas to potential clients who barely looked at him. Some laughed politely, some hung up abruptly, and others simply ignored him. He felt the sting of rejection more times than he could count. But each no only strengthened his resolve. He began to see rejection not as failure, but as part of the process. Every closed door taught him something, and he became more careful, more strategic, and more determined with every step. Money was tight. He had saved a little from past jobs, but it was never enough. He worked late into the night, often surviving on quick meals and little sleep, trying to stretch every dollar. He took small freelance projects and side jobs, anything that could keep him afloat while he pursued his larger vision. There were nights when he would sit at his tiny desk, staring at his laptop screen, feeling exhausted and unsure if he could continue. But even in those moments, he refused to quit. He remembered the boardroom, the dismissal, and the fire it had ignited in him. He knew that success would not come easily, and he was ready to endure whatever it took. Slowly, he began to learn. He devoured books on business, leadership, and innovation. He attended online courses, watched videos, and sought advice from people who had walked similar paths. He learned about budgets, marketing, and client relationships. He discovered the importance of persistence, preparation, and presentation. Each lesson, no matter how small, became a building block for his dream. And as he learned, he grew, not just as a businessman, but as a person. Alongside his learning, he built his network. At first, it was just a few people who shared his vision, but over time it expanded. Mentors offered guidance, friends provided encouragement, and eventually he met others who were willing to collaborate. These connections taught him more than any book or course ever could. He learned how to communicate effectively, how to negotiate, and how to lead with both confidence and empathy. He also realized that success was not a solo journey. It required collaboration, trust, and the willingness to listen. Even with progress, the struggle was real. There were moments when bills piled up faster than he could pay them, when clients backed out at the last minute, and when setbacks threatened to undo months of hard work. Some nights he wondered if the dream was worth it. But every time doubt crept in, he thought about why he had started. He thought about the dismissal, the disbelief in that boardroom, and the feeling of being underestimated. That memory became fuel for his determination. He reminded himself that he could not control the opinions of others, but he could control his effort, his focus, and his perseverance. He also faced societal challenges. Being a young black man in business meant he encountered biases and barriers that others might never understand. Some doors closed simply because of assumptions about his background. He was underestimated, judged, or dismissed by people who had no idea of his capabilities. But rather than letting this discourage him, he used it as motivation. He refused to allow prejudice to define his journey. Every time he proved someone wrong, even in small ways, he felt a quiet sense of victory. Amid the struggle, small successes began to appear. His ideas started attracting attention. A few clients trusted him, giving him projects that allowed him to demonstrate his skill and creativity. His work received positive feedback, and word of mouth slowly brought more opportunities. These successes, though modest, felt monumental to him. They were proof that he was moving in the right direction, that his ideas were not just dreams, but tangible solutions that others valued. He learned to celebrate these small victories. Each successful project, each satisfied client became a stepping stone toward something bigger. He documented his progress, refined his strategies, and built a reputation for quality, innovation, and reliability. Over time, he became known not just for his ideas, but for his ability to deliver results. People began to recognize his talent, and doors that were once closed began to open. The journey was not just professional, it was personal. The struggle forced him to confront his fears, doubts, and insecurities. He learned patience, resilience, and the importance of staying true to his vision. He discovered that confidence came not from being accepted by others, but from believing in himself. And he learned the value of support, of surrounding himself with people who encouraged him, challenged him, and believed in his potential. Through all this, he kept his long-term goal in mind. He remembered the company that had dismissed him, and he realized that one day he wanted to return, not to seek revenge, but to show what determination, vision, and perseverance could accomplish. That thought was never about bitterness. It was about proving that talent and hard work could overcome prejudice and rejection. It became a quiet, steady motivation that guided his actions and decisions. As his business began to grow, he also began to think strategically. He studied the industry carefully, observing competitors, trends, and gaps in the market. He identified areas where his company could excel, where innovation was needed, and where he could make a meaningful impact. He did not rush. He understood that building a strong foundation was more important than chasing immediate recognition. Every client he served, every project he completed, became a part of that foundation. He also invested in people. As his small business expanded, he hired individuals who shared his vision, who brought their own skills and passion to the table. He treated them with respect, valued their contributions, and created an environment where ideas could flourish. He realized that leadership was not about authority, but about inspiring others, guiding them and building a team that could achieve greatness together. Time passed, and his efforts began to bear fruit. His business gained credibility, attracting clients who respected his expertise and creativity. Projects grew larger, and his reputation as a capable, innovative, and reliable entrepreneur spread. He was no longer just a young man trying to prove himself. He was a leader, someone who others looked to for guidance, solutions, and inspiration. Even as he achieved these milestones, he never forgot the early days, the late nights, the uncertainty, the constant struggle. He remembered the fear he felt when he first started, the financial worries, and the emotional toll of rejection. Those memories kept him grounded and humble, reminding him that success was not just about personal gain, but about the journey, the lessons learned, and the impact he could have on others. Throughout all of this, he nurtured his vision of the future. He imagined a time when he could influence larger decisions, when he could lead a company with integrity, innovation, and inclusivity. He envisioned a workplace where ideas were judged on merit, not background, where talent and effort were recognized, not dismissed. That vision became a guiding light, shaping his decisions, strategies, and ambitions. He also learned the importance of patience. He realized that progress is often slow, that setbacks are inevitable, and that success is rarely instant. But each small step, each lesson learned, brought him closer to his ultimate goal. He embraced the journey, understanding that the challenges he faced were part of the process, preparing him for the larger opportunities ahead. By the end of this phase in his life, he had transformed. The young man who had been dismissed in a boardroom, humiliated and underestimated, had become a confident, capable, and respected entrepreneur. He had built a small business from the ground up, learned the value of persistence, and developed a vision that was both practical and ambitious. He had faced rejection, prejudice, and financial struggle, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. And though he had achieved much, he knew the journey was far from over. The dismissal he had once endured remained a vivid memory, a reminder of what he had overcome and what he still aimed to achieve. He understood that the future held opportunities to not only grow his business, but also make a meaningful impact on the industry and the people around him. That vision, combined with his experience and determination, would guide him as he prepared for the next phase of his journey, a phase that promised to be even more transformative, challenging, and rewarding. Time had passed, and the young man who once left a boardroom feeling humiliated had grown into a confident and capable entrepreneur. His business, which had started small with little more than hope and determination, was now gaining traction. Clients trusted him, projects were coming in steadily, and his reputation as a reliable, innovative thinker was spreading. He had learned to navigate challenges, to plan carefully, and to act decisively. Yet, in the quiet moments, he often thought back to the company that had once dismissed him, the room where he had felt small and unseen. He had no desire for revenge, but he could not deny that he had always imagined a day when circumstances might give him the chance to return, not as a visitor, but as someone whose ideas and vision could no longer be ignored. That thought motivated him, pushing him to work harder, learn more, and expand his influence. He began to look at the industry as a whole, studying trends, noticing which companies were struggling, and identifying opportunities where his insight could make a difference. It became clear that the company that had once dismissed him was facing challenges. Its leadership had grown complacent, relying on outdated strategies and resisting change. Products that had once been innovative were now losing ground to competitors. The young man watched quietly from the sidelines, recognizing patterns that others in the industry missed. He understood that the company's problems were not because the employees lacked talent, but because the leadership was unwilling to listen to new ideas. This realization sparked an idea. If he could position his company strategically, he could not only grow his business further but also create an opportunity to influence the larger industry. He began planning carefully, analyzing financials, studying market gaps, and considering ways to partner with or invest in other businesses. He approached each step methodically, ensuring that his moves were calculated and would strengthen his position. His business continued to grow steadily. He hired talented individuals who shared his vision, building a team that was creative, hardworking, and loyal. He encouraged collaboration, valued input from all members, and created an environment where ideas were judged on merit, not rank or background. His team thrived under his guidance, and together they started taking on larger projects, gaining recognition and respect in the industry. Meanwhile, the memory of that boardroom stayed with him, but it had transformed. It was no longer a source of pain or anger. It had become a reminder of how far he had come. He used it to stay humble, grounded, and focused. He knew that success was not just about winning. It was about learning, growing, and building something lasting. Every decision he made was informed by both his experience and his vision for the future. Opportunity came in an unexpected form. He was approached by a business associate who mentioned that the company that had once dismissed him was struggling financially and was considering outside investment. Many executives were unsure about the future, and there was talk of a potential buyout. When he heard this, a mixture of emotions surged through him: surprise, caution, and excitement. He knew this could be a pivotal moment, a chance to finally return in a way that was meaningful and transformative. He did not act impulsively. Instead, he spent weeks preparing. He reviewed the company's financial statements, studied their operations, and identified areas where improvements could be made. He considered how his own business could complement theirs, and how his leadership could bring innovation and growth. He planned every meeting, every proposal, and every negotiation with care. This was not just about business. It was about proving that his ideas, which had once been dismissed, were valid, valuable, and capable of driving change. When he finally met with the executives, he presented a clear, well-researched plan. He spoke with calm confidence, outlining how his company could invest, improve operations, and help the struggling business regain its footing. He highlighted opportunities for innovation, better customer engagement, and long-term growth. His approach was professional, respectful, and strategic. He was not there to humiliate anyone, but to demonstrate the value of experience, vision, and informed decision-making. The executives were surprised. Some had remembered him from years ago, the young man who had been dismissed so abruptly. Others had only heard of his reputation as a rising entrepreneur. They listened, intrigued by his knowledge, impressed by his preparation, and persuaded by his vision. It became clear that he was not just an investor or advisor. He was someone who could lead with intelligence, fairness, and insight. Negotiations were challenging. Some board members were resistant, unwilling to accept that a former outsider could now have influence over their company. Others questioned whether his plans were realistic. But he remained composed. He addressed concerns calmly, provided evidence, and demonstrated his commitment not just to profit, but to growth, sustainability, and innovation. His ability to combine strategic thinking with empathy and leadership won many over. Slowly, the process moved forward. Offers were made, proposals were reviewed, and discussions continued over several weeks. During this time, he continued to run his own business, balancing his responsibilities while keeping a clear focus on the opportunity before him. He remained patient, knowing that rushing could compromise the outcome. He reminded himself that true success required careful planning, confidence, and persistence. Finally, the day came when the deal was finalized. His company made a significant investment, gaining controlling interest in the once dismissive business. The boardroom that had once rejected him was now a space where he had authority, influence, and a chance to implement his vision. The emotions were complex. There was satisfaction, pride, and a quiet sense of justice. But above all, there was clarity. This was not about revenge. It was about creating something better, something lasting, and something meaningful. He stepped into his new role with humility and confidence. He understood that leadership was not about asserting dominance, but about listening, guiding, and inspiring others. He met with employees, many of whom were anxious about the changes. He reassured them, shared his vision, and invited their input. He made it clear that the company's future would be shaped by collaboration, innovation, and respect for everyone's contributions. Over the following months, he implemented strategic changes. Outdated processes were updated, employee training programs were introduced, and communication improved at every level. He encouraged innovation, celebrated achievements, and fostered an environment where everyone felt valued. The company began to thrive, regaining stability, growth, and confidence. Employees responded positively, motivated not only by the improved work conditions but also by the example of a leader who had faced rejection, persevered, and succeeded. He also reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the young man who had been dismissed in a boardroom to a respected entrepreneur with the power to influence an entire company, the path had been long and difficult. He remembered the nights of doubt, the financial struggles, and the emotional toll of repeated rejection. But each challenge had prepared him for this moment. Each failure had taught him resilience, patience, and strategy. Each small victory had built the foundation for the larger success he now enjoyed. Despite the achievement, he remained grounded. He knew that leadership came with responsibility, and that success was not permanent without continued effort and vision. He continued to focus on growth, innovation, and learning, always seeking ways to improve both his company and himself. He understood that true accomplishment was measured not just by personal gain, but by the positive impact one could have on others and on the organization as a whole. The story of his comeback began to spread quietly throughout the industry. People were impressed by his journey, inspired by his resilience, and intrigued by his leadership style. He became a role model for young entrepreneurs, demonstrating that determination, intelligence, and integrity could overcome even the most dismissive obstacles. He did not boast about the past or seek to highlight the humiliation he had faced. Instead, he focused on the present and the future, showing through action what was possible when one refused to give up. In private moments, he reflected on the lesson he had learned. Rejection is not the end of the journey. It is often the beginning of growth, learning, and opportunity. Being dismissed or underestimated does not define a person's potential. What matters is how one responds, through perseverance, creativity, and belief in oneself. That lesson had guided him through every challenge and would continue to shape his decisions in the years ahead. By the end of this phase of his journey, he had not only returned to the company that once dismissed him, but he had done so as someone who had earned respect through skill, vision, and persistence. He had transformed a painful memory into motivation, an obstacle into an opportunity, and rejection into achievement. And while the story was far from over, this chapter marked a turning point, a moment when preparation, resilience, and ambition met opportunity, creating a path to leadership and influence that had once seemed impossible. The day he officially stepped into the role of the new owner of the company was unlike any day he had experienced before. He remembered the first time he had walked through those glass doors, filled with hope but dismissed in minutes. Now the atmosphere was completely different. People looked at him with a mix of respect, curiosity, and even disbelief. He walked through the corridors slowly, greeting employees with a calm confidence, aware of the history and the opportunity before him. His first order of business was to meet with the management team. Some of the executives who had once doubted him were still in the building, and they sat across the table, cautious and uncertain. He did not let their previous attitudes bother him. Instead, he focused on establishing a tone of collaboration and vision. He shared his ideas for growth, emphasizing innovation, inclusivity, and long-term success. He made it clear that he valued their experience and input, but that the company's culture needed to evolve to meet modern challenges. Change was not easy. Many people were nervous, unsure of what the new leadership meant for their roles and future. Rumors circulated about layoffs and restructuring, but he addressed these fears openly, reassuring employees that his goal was not to punish or humiliate anyone, but to build a stronger company where everyone could thrive. He explained that talent, effort, and creativity would be recognized, and that everyone had the opportunity to contribute to the company's new direction. He also focused on immediate improvements. Outdated processes that had slowed productivity were reevaluated, and new systems were introduced to make work more efficient. He encouraged departments to collaborate, breaking down barriers that had previously kept teams isolated. Employees began to notice the difference. Meetings became more productive, communication improved, and people felt their opinions mattered. Slowly, the culture of the company began to shift. Beyond operations, he wanted to inspire a sense of ownership and pride among employees. He held workshops, team-building activities, and brainstorming sessions where everyone's ideas were welcomed. He celebrated achievements openly, recognizing employees not just for results but for creativity, initiative, and commitment. People who had once been demoralized by rigid leadership began to regain confidence and motivation. They saw a leader who had faced rejection, overcome challenges, and built success through perseverance, and they wanted to follow that example. One of the most important aspects of his leadership was listening. He made time to speak with employees at all levels, learning about their challenges, their ideas, and their goals. He understood that leadership was not just about giving orders, but about understanding people and creating an environment where everyone could perform at their best. This approach earned him trust, even from those who had been skeptical or hesitant at first. The company's products and services also began to improve under his guidance. He encouraged innovation, asking teams to challenge existing methods and explore new solutions. Marketing strategies were modernized, customer feedback was valued more than ever, and new initiatives were launched to reach wider audiences. Slowly, the company began to regain its competitive edge. Clients and partners noticed the changes, and confidence in the company's direction started to return. While he focused on improving the company, he never forgot the lessons of his past. He remembered the day he had been dismissed, the feeling of humiliation, and the realization that talent alone was not always enough. That experience shaped his leadership style. He believed in giving people chances, nurturing potential, and fostering an environment where no one would feel dismissed simply for being different or ambitious. He wanted the company to be a place where ideas were judged on merit, not appearances, and where effort and dedication were recognized. Despite the improvements, challenges continued to arise. Not everyone welcomed the changes, and some resisted the new policies and approaches. There were setbacks, disagreements, and moments of frustration, but he approached each situation calmly, addressing concerns with patience and clarity. He understood that transforming a company took time, persistence, and empathy. He refused to let obstacles derail his vision. As the months passed, the company began to transform visibly. Productivity increased, employee satisfaction improved, and client relationships strengthened. Teams collaborated more effectively, innovative ideas were implemented, and the company started to regain its position in the market. Employees began to feel proud of their work and motivated to contribute further. They saw that their leader had faced the same struggles they sometimes felt, and that his success was the result of determination, focus, and the willingness to take risks. He also began mentoring young employees personally, sharing the lessons he had learned during his own journey. He emphasized resilience, strategic thinking, and the importance of staying true to one's vision. He encouraged them to take initiative, to challenge norms respectfully, and to believe in their abilities even when others doubted them. Many employees were inspired by his story, seeing firsthand how perseverance and leadership could turn challenges into opportunities. Beyond internal changes, he looked outward. He explored new partnerships, expanded into different markets, and modernized the company's branding. His approach was strategic yet empathetic, balancing growth with sustainability and integrity. He aimed to ensure that the company was not just profitable, but also respected, innovative, and capable of making a positive impact on the industry. Throughout this process, he remained humble. He understood that the company's success was a collective effort, built by employees, partners, and his own team. He celebrated achievements without arrogance and acknowledged contributions openly. This humility strengthened his credibility and reinforced the culture of respect he wanted to cultivate. One day, while walking through the office, he overheard a conversation between two employees who were discussing how different the company felt now compared to a year ago. They spoke about the improved atmosphere, the feeling of being valued and the excitement of working on new projects. He smiled quietly, realizing that the changes he had worked so hard to implement were having an impact, not just on profits, but on people's lives. His story of return and transformation began to circulate beyond the company. Industry colleagues, former clients, and competitors recognized his achievement, not just for taking over a struggling company, but for transforming it into a place where innovation, respect, and collaboration thrived. People admired the way he had handled the situation with dignity and strategy, rather than seeking revenge or focusing on past injustices. Even as he succeeded, he never stopped planning for the future. He continued to look for ways to innovate, improve, and expand. He set ambitious goals for growth, technology, and employee development. He encouraged creative problem-solving and rewarded initiative, ensuring that the company remained dynamic and forward-thinking. He understood that resting on past accomplishments was not an option. True leadership required constant effort, vision, and adaptability. At night, he often reflected on his journey, from the young man who had been dismissed in a boardroom to the leader transforming the very company that had underestimated him. The path had been filled with struggle, learning, and growth. He thought about the moments of doubt, the financial hardships, and the emotional toll of repeated challenges. He remembered the mentors who guided him, the friends who encouraged him, and the lessons that shaped his resilience. Each memory reinforced the values that guided him as a leader: perseverance, empathy, vision, and integrity. He also reflected on the broader impact of his actions. By creating a culture of respect, collaboration, and innovation, he was not only transforming a company but also setting an example for the industry. He was proving that leadership was not about asserting dominance or holding grudges, but about creating opportunities, valuing people, and turning challenges into growth. His journey inspired others to persevere, innovate, and believe in their abilities, even in the face of rejection or prejudice. The employees who had once feared change now worked with enthusiasm and pride. Teams collaborated on projects with energy and creativity. Departments that had previously operated in silos were now sharing ideas and strategies. The company was becoming a place where talent was nurtured, innovation was encouraged, and every voice mattered. He made it clear that this transformation was not a one-time effort, but a continuous process. He encouraged feedback, listened to concerns, and adapted strategies as needed. He remained approachable, visible, and involved, ensuring that employees felt supported and inspired. By leading through example, he fostered a culture of accountability, creativity, and respect. Through it all, he never forgot the young man he had once been, the one who left the boardroom feeling dismissed, frustrated, and underestimated. That young man's dreams, determination, and refusal to give up had brought him to this point. And now, as he led the company into a new era, he understood that every struggle, every rejection, and every lesson had been necessary to prepare him for this moment. The transformation of the company became a symbol of his journey, from dismissal to determination, from struggle to success, and from ambition to leadership. It was proof that perseverance, vision, and integrity could overcome obstacles, change perceptions, and create lasting impact. And as he looked out over the office, seeing employees engaged, motivated, and proud of their work, he knew that the real victory was not just in taking control, but in shaping an environment where everyone could thrive, contribute, and succeed. After months of hard work, dedication, and careful planning, the company was thriving under his leadership. It was no longer a place defined by outdated methods or dismissive attitudes. The employees who had once feared change now felt valued, heard, and motivated. Teams collaborated across departments, ideas were encouraged, and innovation became part of the company's core culture. Every project, every decision, and every small improvement reflected the leadership he had worked so hard to establish. He walked through the office one morning, observing the energy and focus of his team. People were brainstorming ideas, solving problems, and supporting one another. There was a sense of pride and ownership in the work, a feeling that everyone contributed to something bigger than themselves. He smiled quietly, remembering the days when he had felt dismissed alone.